Hello again, RoyZesch.REALTOR here with Coldwell Banker Legacy in San Angelo. Today I want to talk to you about property taxes. A couple of different things I want to mention is how to lower your property taxes, do what you can within the legal system, a little bit of how the process works, and some of the exemptions that are out there, just making sure you qualify for them if possible. So first off, the basic part of it. There's three parts to the property tax system. Basically, they're all done on a percentage of the value of the house. So in San Angelo area, you have the San Angelo ISD, you have Tom Green County, and you have the city of San Angelo. And if you're outside the city limits, then the city of San Angelo is not a part of that. So how the process works is these three entities got together, and instead of each one of them doing their own taxing system, they set up the Tom Green County Appraisal District. The appraisal district values the properties for all the entities, uses the same value, and then each one of those taxing entities collects the money, gets their respective parts of the money. So just so you kind of know how all that works, the rate in San Angelo is about $2.50 per $100. So basically 2.5% of the value of your house paid every year. If you're outside the city of San Angelo, that drops by about 3/4, so it's about 1.75 or something like that. So just a rough thing of how that works. So what happens is the appraisal district does a value on your house. And once they take that valuation, then they just plug in the percentages in it for each of the three taxing entities, and that's where they come up with your tax bill. So there's nothing you can do to change the percentages that are taxed, the tax rates for any of those three entities. The only thing you can really affect, or two things that you can really affect, is the valuation. If it's incorrect, there's a protest process that you can go through, and then two, the exemptions that you can claim. So first is the exemptions. If it's your homestead, your primary residence, then you can get a homestead exemption on it. That has to be filed, and normally it stays in effect. You can only have one of them. There's some rules and restrictions on it, but you have to take care of that. And if the homestead exemption does not apply, then you need to go to the appraisal district and get it filed and recorded. You can always do it. It's in the future. So when you buy a new house, you have to do it for that house. As long as you own that house, it should stay in effect, unless they have reasons to believe that it's inaccurate. Then there's also ag exemptions. If it's land that, agricultural land used for farming, ranching, even you can do some with deer management, wildlife management programs and stuff like that, and you can get an ag exemption. And that will generally stay in effect as long as the property is in that type of use. There may be some documentation required, because a lot of times people try to use it for semi-rural properties, which is legitimate as long as there is ag use, but the taxing entities, the appraisal district does have the right to ask for documentation on how it's being used and make sure it's still being used that way. If you lose an ag exemption, so something to think about when you're buying a piece of property, then it takes 5 years to reestablish the exemption. So you have to use it for agricultural purposes for 5 years before you can get that ag exemption back. There's some other exemptions and stuff over 65, and you just make sure those things are applied when applicable. The over 65 actually locks in your tax amount after you pass that point. So you just have to make sure these things are being done properly if they apply to you. So the other thing is in the valuation. So what's done, and basically the state orders it done by the appraisal districts, is they have to have a real market value on these properties. Well, that's difficult. I mean, you think of it, the Tom Green County Appraisal District, there's, I don't know what the number is, 30,000 to 40,000 houses in Tom Green County that they're supposed to appraise. So they don't appraise them the way an appraiser would go out and appraise them. They kind of come up with some rough numbers depending on the neighborhood, age of the house, square footage, and start from there. And then they apply a increase factor based on, over time, every year it's going to go up 3% or whatever the numbers they use are, and they just keep raising it by that amount. So this is where it sneaks up on you. First off, the original appraisal could be very inaccurate because they don't go inside the house. They do know square footage if everything has been permitted. Sometimes you find houses that have had unpermitted additions that then the county appraisal district does not know the square footage. So there's an issue there. So basically what it comes down to is if you get when you get your notification, they have to give it to you every year, then there's a time of protest after that. So when you get that notification, look at the value on your house. And if you think it is out of line, then start doing some more research. There's, again, the free websites are not terribly accurate, but Zillow and some of those can give you a good bit of information. You can look on any of the other websites and find out what listings are in your neighborhood and kind of get an idea of the values in your area and see if it's as out of line as you think it is. If it is, then there's a protest process. So you have to file for the protest within about 30 days from the time you get the notification of your taxing of valuation, because basically you're protesting the valuation. You can't change the tax rates. You're saying, well, you said my house is worth $200,000. I think it's really only worth $150,000. Sometimes you can actually talk to them on the phone and get them to reduce it, explain the information you have, show them the comparable sales or listings or something in the area and get that done. Sometimes you can. I always recommend you file for the protest, because that means you get a hearing if it goes to that point, and then try to make the phone call and see if you can work it out. So then you come up with some value information. If you can't solve it over the phone, they think their problem is that their rate is legitimate, then the first step is call me. As a realtor, I can go and pull what's called a competitive market analysis and look at some sales that have happened in that area and come up with what I sort of think your value of your property is. So you can take that to them and say, okay, here's what this real estate agent said he thinks the value of the property is based on these sales in the area. So a lot of times that will get it done. And if you want to go to even a step further than that, if you're not successful at that, but you feel real confident that the number is incorrect, you can actually have an appraisal done. You have to pay for an appraiser. An appraiser will go out and do more or less the same thing I do. It's a more in-depth version, but do more or less the same thing, and then document that to the appraisal district. And it's really hard for them to fight that, but it can cost several $100s. So it has to be a large discrepancy before that makes sense. So those are the options you have. The key is don't ignore it. When you get that valuation in the mail every spring, and it's usually April or May, somewhere in that time frame, when you get it, look at it and say, okay, first off, how much did it go up from last year? Do I think that's legitimate? And what is the value of my house? And if you think that number is too high, then that's the time to start the protest process at that point. Don't ignore it. Hope it'll go away, because what you're going to end up doing is you're going to pay a little bit more every year for your taxes, and that's not what you want to do. If your value is greatly undervalued, then generally I wouldn't say anything. You just let it go. You're paying less in taxes than you would otherwise be. And sometimes when you do remodels and stuff like that on a house or upgrades that aren't visible, the taxing entity, the appraisal district, doesn't know you've done those, so they're not reflected. The value of your house doesn't go up according to those, which is to your benefit until the time it's sold. So when it's sold, then they do have access to the sales information that the realtors use, and they can use that to help fine-tune their values. But basically what they do is they apply an increase factor to them, typically every year or every few years, 2 or 3 years, and just raise them by that percentage. And it's a simple way to do it, and it's moderately accurate if the original number was good. And realistically in San Angelo, houses go up a couple of percents a year if you look over the long term. When oil boom was up, they went up a lot quicker for a few years, and then they flattened out since then. So it's not perfect, but it does seem to work. But just don't ignore the numbers. When you get the numbers, look at them. If you think that you're paying too much, that your home is valued too high, then it's good to work on it. Then start the protest process, see what you need to do to get it lowered to a more reasonable value. It has an ability to save you a whole lot of money. I mean, a whole lot of money in many cases, because they can be drastically overvalued if you haven't paid attention to it. So any more questions, just give me a call. RoyZesch.REALTOR, 325-268-0775. Thank you.